Prologue. The birth of a duchess. The winds howled over Castle Argyll as the child drew her first breath. A storm, furious and unrelenting, battered the ancient stone walls as if nature itself raged at what had just occurred within. Servants whispered of omens, of births accompanied by tempests, of spirits stirring in the highlands when destiny took an unexpected turn. But their murmurs were quickly silenced by the Duke himself, whose grief and wrath had already begun to take root. The Duchess of Argyll, born Princess Zaria of Umoja, lay pale and still upon her bed, her hand limp and cold in her husband's trembling grasp. The midwife, eyes averted, whispered what he already knew. The woman who had captivated him on the coast of Africa, whose dowry had saved his family from ruin, was gone. In her place lay a squalling, brown-skinned infant, a girl with eyes like polished marble, already cutting through the candlelight with an unnerving calm. The Duke did not weep. He had never been a man of tears, and though his heart splintered at the sight of Zaria's lifeless form, his jaw tightened instead. For her, I will see this child live, no matter what the world thinks. But the world thought plenty. By the time the storm cleared and the sun returned to the Scottish hills, whispers spread from the servants' quarters to the parlours of Edinburgh. The Duke's heir was not like other noble children. Brown-skinned, hair black as midnight with a faint wave not seen among the women of Britain. They called her the Moorish babe in hushed tones, some cruel enough to wonder if she would be fit for any marriage, despite the blood of a princess flowing through her veins. Michelle, the Black Duchess, would never know the softness of her mother's lullabies, nor the warmth of a court eager to cradle her. From the earliest days, her life within Castle Argyll was not gilded but caged. When the Duke travelled, to London, to Africa, to the continent, she was locked away in her chambers like some shameful secret, left in the care of servants who loathed their station and took their frustrations out upon her. Cold baths, cold meals, colder words. They could not touch her noble blood, but they could make her feel the sting of isolation. And yet, even as a child, she watched. She listened from behind wooden screens when the steward met with tenants. She studied the ledgers her father left upon his desk, running her small fingers over the columns until the numbers made sense. She memorized the languages of the staff, Gaelic curses, clipped English, soft Swahili lullabies from the one nurse who dared show kindness before being dismissed. By 10, she understood the estate better than most grown men. It was on the eve of her 10th birthday when her father's hunting accident left him bedridden and near crippled. The household, sensing weakness, prepared to abandon its duties and leave the Duke's holdings to crumble. Michelle, still slight and small, entered her father's chamber with her chin held high and a ledger clutched in her arms. "Father," she said, voice steady despite her age, "let me run Argyll. I know its debts, I know its tenants. If you trust me, we will not fall." The Duke, staring at the daughter who mirrored Zaria's regal bearing more each day, studied her for a long moment. Then, with a weary nod, he gave her the seal of the house. By morning she had dismissed nearly every servant, replacing them with families loyal to the Granger name, families she promised shelter, schooling for their children, and wages enough to free them from generations of debt. In return, they would serve not as masters, but as stewards of the land alongside her. The castle began to stir with life again, not the life of pomp and cruelty, but of order and purpose. The staff called her the little Duchess, though never to her face. To her face they bowed. The Black Duchess of Scotland was no ordinary child. She was a storm-born heir, forged from the ashes of love and the cruelty of man, destined to one day bring the proud halls of London to their knees. And when her 21st year came, and the kings of the world gathered at her father's estate with gold, diamonds, silks and deeds to honour her birthright, every noble lady in England would learn that there are jewels the crown cannot own. And one, in particular, would begin to plot her destruction. Shadows in the attic. The day the Duke left for the fateful hunting trip, Castle Argyll felt colder than usual. The staff, relieved to have no noble eyes watching over them, began their petty reign. Doors that once opened to Michelle slammed in her face. Meals were forgotten or intentionally left to spoil before reaching her plate. By nightfall she was banished to the attic, a cramped, drafty space where the wind whistled through gaps in the roof and shadows crept like fingers across the wooden floorboards. The attic smelled of dust, damp wood and old linens, but it was not the smell that unsettled her most. It was the silence, the way the castle below seemed alive with laughter and activity, while she was left alone in a place not fit for a duchess, barely fit for a servant. Curled on a thin blanket beneath a slanted beam, Michelle stared at the flickering flame of the candle she had managed to keep hidden from the steward. Her fingers traced the edges of the locket she always wore around her neck, the only piece of her mother she possessed. Inside, a single miniature portrait, Princess Zaria, radiant even in the faded paint, her almond eyes soft but commanding, her full lips curved in a smile that looked both regal and warm. Michelle remembered her father's voice the first time he had told her of her mother, the night she had asked why the maids whispered the word outsider when they passed her. He had sat her upon his knee by the fire, his hand resting on her small shoulder. "Your mother was unlike any woman the world had seen," he had murmured, his voice carrying the weight of love and loss. "She was a princess of Umoja, daughter of kings whose wealth and wisdom surpassed empires. When I first beheld her I thought myself cursed, for how could a man like me deserve a creature so radiant? But she chose me, not for my title nor my need. She saw a man who could build with her, not take from her. The world was cruel to her for loving me, and now it is cruel to you, but my jewel, that cruelty will forge you harder than iron, and when your time comes they will bow." The memory of his words anchored Michelle as another gust of wind slipped through the attic. Below, she could hear the muffled clatter of cutlery and distant laughter from the servants, those same servants who had once bowed low in her presence when her father was home, but now, emboldened, treated her as though she were a burden, an inconvenience. Tears pricked her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She pressed her thumb against her mother's painted face in the locket and whispered into the darkness, "They will not break me, Mamma. They will wish they had treated me kindly." It was in that cold attic at barely 10 years old that Michelle's resolve crystallized. No nursemaids, no sympathetic ladies-in-waiting, only her mother's memory, her father's belief, and her own unyielding will. By the end of that week, news reached the castle that the Duke's hunting party had returned early. He had been thrown from his horse, his leg shattered, and the healers whispered that he might never walk again. The staff muttered about abandoning the estate, fearing they would not be paid with the Duke bedridden and debts mounting. Michelle, clad in a simple wool dress, descended from the attic. Her small footsteps echoed in the grand hall as she walked past gaping servants and straight into her father's chambers. The Duke, pale but awake, looked at her with a mix of pride and worry. "Father," she said, standing taller than her 10 years should allow, "you once told me the world would bow, but not if this estate falls to ruin. Let me run Argyll. I know the tenants, I know the debts, I know who can be trusted. Give me the seal and I will save what is ours." The Duke, broken in body but not in mind, studied his daughter, this child who bore Zaria's commanding gaze and none of her softness. Slowly, he reached for the carved seal of the house and placed it in her palm. And in that moment, in the flicker of firelight, the Black Duchess was truly born.